Extinction didn't erase their terror. It sealed their legacy, and I find it fascinating that for more than 600 million years, Earth served as a proving ground for predators, with nature constantly the rules of survival. From jungles to oceans to skies filled with death, prehistoric life wasn't just about survival, but about dominance. It's a strange thought, but the first Smilodon remains were initially misidentified as belonging to a hyena, all because of some similar-looking cheek teeth. Imagine being an apex predator, ruling the wild. Life at the top has its perks, but even the most fearsome hunters aren't always the biggest. Size isn't everything. Yet, every so often, nature outdoes itself, creating a carnivore so specialized, so perfectly adapted to hunting big game that it seems almost mythical. These beasts develop weapons tailored for tackling the giants of their time. And not too long ago, one such feline prowled our planet. This wasn't just any big cat, but the undisputed monarch of the Ice Age, Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat extraordinaire. With its iconic saber teeth, Smilodon is instantly recognizable, a status solidified by films like Ice Age. But it didn't start that way. Rewind 160 years and picture yourself in Brazil. It's here that our tale begins with the discovery that perplexed the scientific community. When the first Smilodon remains were unearthed, paleontologists didn't immediately recognize them as belonging to a cat. In fact, their initial guess was way off. Based on some isolated cheek teeth that bore an uncanny resemblance to those of modern hyenas, they dubbed this new-find hyena Neogaea. However, within a couple of years, the tides of discovery brought forth a tsunami of new fossils. Suddenly, scientists weren't just looking at a few teeth, but a veritable jigsaw puzzle of prehistoric proportions. Foot bones, skull fragments, and those iconic canines, which seemed almost comically oversized, painted a very different picture. As the pieces fell into place, it became clear that this was no hyena. Instead, they were dealing with a completely new genus of feline, one that was not only massive in size, but also built like a prehistoric tank. This feline was far more robust than any modern cat, a true heavyweight champion of the Ice Age. In light of this revelation, a new name was in order. Thus, Smilodon populator was born. Smilodon meaning knife tooth, and populator roughly translating to the destroyer or he who brings devastation. It's a fitting moniker for a predator that redefined what it meant to be lethal. With its new identity established, the scientific community dove headfirst into unraveling the Smilodon's family tree. This quest continues to this day, with researchers currently placing our knife-toothed friend in the extinct subfamily Misidentified. This subfamily is home to most of what we colloquially call saber-toothed tigers, though saber-toothed cats is more accurate since these ancient felines aren't closely related to modern tigers or any living cats for that matter. In fact, their closest living relatives might be members of the feline subfamily, which includes our domestic kitties. Within the Misidentified, Smilodon found itself in an even more exclusive club, the Smilodon, or as some paleontologists like to call them, the dirk-toothed cats. This group is pretty exclusive, with only 5 known genera calling it home. But what Smilodon lacks in diversity, it makes up for in star power thanks to Smilodon. As research progressed, scientists discovered that Smilodon wasn't a lone standout. It was more like a prehistoric trio with three distinct members, each bringing something unique to the table. S. gracilis, S. fatalis, and S. populator. Now, if you found yourself face to face with any of these species, you probably wouldn't be too concerned with which one was about to turn you into lunch, but they did have their differences. First up, we have S. gracilis, the elder statesman of the group. This OG appeared in North America about 2.5 million years ago, descending from an even older genus called Meganterion. Next came S. fatalis, strutting onto the scene roughly 1 million years later. Last, but certainly not least, S. populator made its grand entrance about 600,000 years after fatalis, fashionably late to the Ice Age party. S. gracilis, while no slouch in the size department, was the runt of the litter, tipping the scales at about the same weight as a modern jaguar. S. fatalis, living up to its name, was a step up in the terror department, matching an African lion in size, but packing on extra muscle like a feline bodybuilder. We're talking about 280 kilos or 620 pounds of prehistoric fury. That's on par with the largest tigers roaming the earth today, but S. populator dominated them all. This behemoth pushed the boundaries of felid physiology, with the largest known specimens estimated to have weighed in at a jaw-dropping 470 kilos or 1,040 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's about the same as a medium-sized polar bear. Interestingly, unlike many modern big cats, Smilodons didn't seem to be too hung up on gender norms. Studies suggest that there wasn't a significant size difference between males and females, a trait scientists call low sexual dimorphism. In practical terms, this means that regardless of whether you were facing a male Smilodon or a female Smilodon, I sometimes imagine walking through the La Brea tar pits, thinking about what it must have been like when Smilodon ruled. It wasn't just a large cat, it was built like a prehistoric tank. Its heel bone was a marvel, so robust and elongated that some paleontologists think these Ice Age acrobats could have outleaped modern lions. Picture a cat the size of a bear capable of leaping over a one-story building. But its athletic prowess didn't stop there. Its forelimbs were approximately 20% thicker than you'd expect for a cat of its size, giving it incredible strength, surpassing even the larger American lion. And at the end of those muscular arms, it was further armed with fully retractable claws, razor-sharp and curved like prehistoric scimitars. They were proportionally enormous, even for a cat of its size, twice the size of a Siberian tiger's and even longer than those of a Kodiak brown bear. These weren't just weapons, they were nature's grappling hooks, perfect for latching onto large prey. But when we think of Smilodon, it's those teeth that capture our imaginations. Saber teeth aren't unique to Smilodon. Nature has experimented with this design throughout history. But Smilodon perfected it. What made its fangs special wasn't just their presence, but their sheer length. They protruded well beyond the lower jaw, a feature uncommon even among other saber-toothed cats. Smilodon's canines could grow up to 8 inches or 20 centimeters long. That's longer than many modern kitchen knives. They were precision instruments of prehistoric destruction, shaped like deadly daggers, with sharp points and smooth, narrow sides, designed to pierce deep into flesh with devastating efficiency. Interestingly, studies have shown that Smilodon's bite was relatively weak, about 1,000 newtons, 4 times weaker than a modern lion's. So how did it kill? That's been a subject of much debate. One popular theory suggests Smilodon was the original ambush predator. Picture one hidden in dense vegetation, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, with a powerful leap, it pounces on its unsuspecting prey. Using those muscular forelimbs and grappling hook claws, it pins down its victim and sinks its saber teeth into the prey's soft underbelly, causing massive internal damage and blood loss. But not everyone buys this gut-stabbing hypothesis. Many researchers favor a different scenario. Smilodon used its powerful build to quickly overpower its prey, then delivered a precise, lethal bite to the throat, causing severe blood loss and suffocation. Adding fuel to this theory is the discovery that Smilodon could open its jaw to an incredible 120 degrees. That's almost twice as wide as a human can manage. But Smilodon wasn't just brawn and teeth. Brain scans of Smilodon skulls suggest that these prehistoric predators had excellent coordination, sharp hearing, and top-notch vision. Their eye socket shape hints at binocular vision, giving them the depth perception needed to judge distances accurately, crucial for a predator that relied on ambush tactics. And if all that wasn't enough, they were fast too. Many Smilodon fossils show trauma to their sternums, the kind of injury you'd expect from high-speed collisions. Smilodon's unique traits, along with its powerful weaponry, made it a versatile hunter capable of taking down a wide variety of megafaunal prey. The specific animals it targeted varied based on the region it called home. In North America, their prey included oversized versions of animals we recognize today, giant bison, camels, and, if the opportunity arose, even mastodons and Columbian mammoths. In South America, Smilodon's targets were equally impressive and diverse, including creatures like Toxodon, Litopterna, various species of Glyptodon, along with more familiar animals such as horses and camelids. Some evidence even suggests that Smilodon occasionally went after caimans. We know what Smilodon ate thanks to skeletal evidence, such as tooth marks on bones, or Smilodon remains found alongside those of their prey. One big question that's still hotly debated in paleontology circles is whether Smilodon was a lone hunter or a team player. Knowing whether Smilodon hunted in packs could tell us a lot about its social structure and what kind of prey it typically targeted. One of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting the idea that Smilodons lived socially comes from the La Brea tar pits in California. These California tar pits are a gold mine for paleontologists, preserving countless Ice Age animals that got stuck in the sticky asphalt. The La Brea tar pits. I've spent so much time imagining that place, a deadly trap, not just for the herbivores who wandered in, but for the predators who came to feast on them. What fascinates me most is the sheer number of Smilodon fossils found there, over 166,000 bones. It makes you wonder, were these saber-toothed cats actually social animals? The idea is this: modern social cat species respond to distress calls. So, if one Smilodon became mired in the tar, it might have called out, attracting others, who then also became trapped. A grim image, certainly, but it could explain the concentration of remains. And then there's the evidence of what some paleontologists call pseudo-healthcare. We've found Smilodon fossils showing severe injuries and disabilities that would have made hunting incredibly difficult. Yet, these individuals survived to adulthood. Could it be that other Smilodons cared for them like modern lions or wolves support their injured? One fossil in particular stands out. A Smilodon with hip dysplasia from a young age who still lived to be an adult. It's hard to imagine how such an animal could have hunted alone. It conjures up this almost heartwarming picture of Smilodon families looking after their own. Of course, not everyone agrees with this Smilodon social club theory. Some researchers point out that Smilodon remains found outside of predator traps like La Brea, tend to be more isolated. This, they argue, suggests a more solitary existence, similar to many modern big cats. Regardless of whether it was a team player or a loner, one thing is certain. Smilodon was at the top of the food chain, but it certainly had competition. The Ice Age was a time of giants, and Smilodon wasn't the only predator with an appetite for mammoth-sized meals. Two of its biggest rivals were the American lion and the dire wolf. Now, while the real dire wolves weren't quite as monstrous as the ones in fiction, they were still formidable predators. Isotope analysis shows they had a diet very similar to Smilodon's, meaning they were often competing for the same prey. Against the American lion, it was probably a standoff. The American lion had size on its side, being one of the largest cats ever. But Smilodon had those impressive canines, which likely served as a deterrent. Most likely, these apex predators tried to avoid each other, but conflicts could have gone either way. The dire wolf, on the other hand, seems to have often lost out in confrontations with Smilodon. Evidence from La Brea suggests that dire wolves would frequently abandon their kills when a Smilodon showed up. Given those sabers on display, most predators would probably decide that discretion was the better part of valor. But lions and wolves weren't the only competition. The Ice Age was also the time of the short-faced bear, a beast that could make even Smilodon look small. Some of these bears reached dinosaurian proportions. However, these giants were more omnivorous than Smilodon, which likely reduced direct competition. Plus, bears tend to be solitary. So, if a group of Smilodons encountered one, the bear would likely decide that this particular picnic basket wasn't worth the trouble. We've talked a lot about Smilodon's hunting adaptations, but how did it eat with those teeth? Those saber-like fangs seem like they would have been quite the obstacle. Smilodon had a solution for that, too. Unlike most predators that can chomp down from the front, it was equipped with specialized slicing teeth called carnassials. These teeth, on the sides of the mouth, worked like biological scissors, shearing through meat with ease. To eat, it would have turned its head to the side, using these carnassials to slice off manageable chunks while its saber teeth stayed out of the way. If this sounds familiar, it's because many modern cats use a similar technique when tackling tough meat. It's a prime example of nature's problem-solving. With its unique adaptations and hunting prowess, Smilodon carved out a vast empire. Between its three species, it achieved a distribution across the Western Hemisphere that would make any modern predator envious. In North America, S. gracilis and S. fatalis roamed from coast to coast, reaching as far north as Alberta, Canada. Meanwhile, in South America, S. fatalis and S. populator established a domain stretching all the way down to Patagonia. But Smilodon wasn't just geographically widespread. It was also adaptable. Fossils have been found in a diverse array of environments, from grasslands and plains to woodlands and closed forests, from savannas to subtropical forests, and even mammoth steppes. This adaptability allowed it to live alongside a veritable who's who of Pleistocene megafauna. We're talking about a world where you might encounter short-faced bears, proboscideans, ground sloths the size of cars, armored glyptodonts, the rhino-like toxodon, camels, deer, horses, bison, and even terror birds. I sometimes imagine what it must have been like, that real-life ice level from a video game, but filled with prehistoric cats. And then, into that world, humans arrived. Our ancestors, armed with so little, encountering Smilodon around 25,000 years ago. Imagine that first meeting, facing a saber-toothed cat with only primitive tools. The relationship must have been tense, a competition for the same food. By the time we arrived, only the larger populator and Asphatulus remained. Bad timing indeed. Given that Meganterion, possibly Smilodon's predecessor, sometimes preyed on Homo erectus, it's easy to think Smilodon saw early humans as prey. But humans are resourceful. Though we lack direct evidence of human Smilodon battles, our superior technology and group tactics likely let us turn the tables sometimes. In 2021, a petroglyph was discovered appearing to show humans observing a Smilodon from afar. It's a glimpse into a world where we shared the landscape with these magnificent, terrifying creatures. But as we know, that coexistence didn't last. Somewhere between then and now, Smilodon vanished. The youngest remains of Asphatulus and his populator date back about 10,000 years, around the time humans were discovering agriculture. The extinction of Smilodon is debated among paleontologists. Some think humans played a role through competition or habitat alteration, like starting fires. Others are less convinced. The more accepted theory points to the broader quaternary extinction event as the main cause. It was a period of significant climate change that saw the disappearance of many large animal species in North and South America. As the megafauna that Smilodon relied on died out, the saber-toothed predator was in trouble. In a cruel twist, the adaptations that made Smilodon a successful hunter became a liability. Specialized to take down giants, Smilodon struggled when those giants disappeared. It was too good at one thing, and when the world changed, it couldn't adapt. The extinction of Smilodon marked the end of an era. It was the last of the saber-toothed cats, not just in the Americas, but worldwide. With its passing, a lineage that had dominated the planet for over 20 million years ended. Its legacy remains in museum exhibits, in our imaginations, and as a reminder of the fragile balance between species and their environments. As we face our own period of rapid change, the lesson of Smilodon is clear. Survival requires adaptation. Mammoths were icons of the Ice Age, towering giants. But they weren't the scariest things out there. Lurking in the same frozen wastelands was a creature that made mammoths look quaint. A beast so massive, so brutally engineered, it was less an animal and more a biological battering ram. Imagine the size of a mammoth, but fused with the destructive force of a medieval war machine. This was no gentle giant. All it needed, was a single monstrous weapon, one so lethal, so precise that every encounter became a high-stakes gamble with survival. This was the true juggernaut of the Ice Age, Elasmotherium sibericum, the creature that should have defined Ice Age dominance from the very beginning. Imagine a rhinoceros that decided regular size wasn't nearly intimidating enough. Now, multiply that by roughly 3, add the bulk of a small elephant, and crown it with a single horn. So massive it could serve as a battering ram for medieval warfare. What you're picturing is still probably smaller than the reality of an elasmotherium. This wasn't just large. It was monumentally, almost absurdly oversized. Standing 6.5 feet at the shoulder and stretching 15 feet from nose to tail, Elasmotherium weighed in at a staggering 5 tons of pure, horn-equipped muscle. But the mements alone don't capture the true horror of encountering this beast. The defining feature, the element that transformed Elasmotherium from merely large to genuinely nightmarish, was the horn. Not horns, plural, like its modern rhinoceros descendants, but a single, massive horn that could reach lengths of up to 6 feet. 6 feet of solid pointed bone jutting from the center of its forehead like some prehistoric unicorn's fever dream. And unlike the mammoth's curved tusks, which were primarily tools for foraging and occasional defense, Elasmotherium's horn was purpose-built for devastation. It was perfectly positioned for charging attacks, designed to concentrate the full force of 5 tons of angry herbivore into a single armor-piercing point. Any creature unfortunate enough to find itself on the receiving end of an Elasmotherium charge wasn't just facing injury, it was facing obliteration. The horn was just the beginning. Strip away that intimidating weapon, and you're still left with a creature that redefined what it meant to be perfectly adapted for the Ice Age. I sometimes wonder if we underestimate the brutal efficiency of the natural world. Take the elasmarium, for example. While mammoths lumbered, struggling against the Ice Age, this creature seemed almost designed for it. Purpose-built, you might say. It begins with the legs, and that's where the truly impressive part starts. Unlike the mammoth's thick, pillar-like limbs, meant for slow, steady movement, the elasmarium's legs were both powerful and agile. They weren't just supports, they were the foundation of a charging mechanism. Imagine 5 tons of muscle and bone accelerating into a full-speed charge, flattening anything in its path. While mammoths distributed their weight relatively evenly, the elasmarium was front-loaded. Every charge was designed to be a catastrophic collision. It wasn't accidental. It was millions of years of brutal efficiency honed into a single purpose: impact. The shoulder muscles alone could absorb the shock of high-speed collisions, the kind that would shatter the bones of lesser creatures. And crucially, the elasmarium seemed to have solved a problem that plagued many Ice Age giants: energy efficiency. Mammoths needed vast quantities of vegetation, but the elasmarium's digestive system was optimized for extracting maximum nutrition from the sparse grasses and tough vegetation of the frozen steppes. This wasn't just survival. It was thriving in conditions that left other megafauna struggling. Its skull, built like a natural helmet, could withstand impacts that would have been fatal to others. The entire head became a weapon system. When the elasmarium charged, it wasn't just the horn that was a threat, it was the entire front end, functioning as an organic siege engine. Mammoths relied on group protection and intimidation. The elasmarium needed no such strategies. It was a solitary predator's nightmare, capable of defending resources and territory through sheer individual dominance. While mammoths huddled for warmth, the elasmarium stood alone because nothing else on that landscape posed a credible threat. And then, of course, there's the horn, that magnificent, terrifying horn, up to 6 feet long, potentially weighing 100 pounds. Not a decorative piece, but a weapon that could punch through ice, tree trunks, and anything else that dared challenge it. A horn longer than a standard parking space is wide, wielded with the precision of a medieval knight and the force of a freight train. The positioning was crucial. Unlike modern rhinos, which carry their horns on their snouts, the elasmarium's horn was mounted directly on its forehead, the optimal position for delivering devastating charging attacks. The physics alone are frightening. When the creature lowered its head to charge, the horn became the leading edge of a 5-ton projectile moving at 25 miles per hour. But it gets more interesting. The horn wasn't just a weapon. Analysis suggests it served multiple functions, giving the elasmarium distinct advantages. The base was broad and sturdy enough to serve as a snowplow, allowing it to clear feeding areas inaccessible to other herbivores. In a world where food was scarce, this ability to access buried vegetation was literally a matter of life and death. The horn surface was likely covered in keratin, like our fingernails, but structured for maximum durability. It would have been constantly growing and self-sharpening, ensuring it remained effective throughout the creature's life. Unlike antlers that shed annually, this horn was a permanent, ever-improving tool of destruction. Recent fossil evidence suggests the horn may have been even more formidable than we imagined. Some specimens show evidence of horn bases that could have supported structures up to 8 feet long. An 8-foot horn on a 5-ton creature represents a level of natural weaponry with no modern equivalent. Imagine being a saber-toothed cat or cave bear, apex predators in their environments, suddenly encountering something that could impale you from 8 feet away. The horn didn't just change how the elasmarium fought, it changed how everything else on the Ice Age landscape had to live. Constantly aware of a creature carrying a weapon that could end any confrontation before it began. The mammoth's tusks, impressive as they were, pale in comparison. Tusks were tools for digging, displaying, and occasional defense. The elasmarium's horn was something else entirely, domination made manifest. It redefined the very concept of herbivore. While mammoths adapted to environments that barely tolerated them, the elasmarium claimed territories that actively welcomed its dominance. The key difference wasn't just what they could survive, it was what they could control. The Eurasian steppe during the Pleistocene seemed designed specifically for creatures like the elasmarium. Vast open grasslands stretched for thousands of miles. To imagine a creature built like a living, battering ram thriving in a landscape of occasional river valleys and scattered patches of woodland. It truly was paradise for them. No dense forests, no steep terrain, just endless expanses where speed, power, and intimidation ruled. What makes Elasmotherium's territorial dominance so remarkable is that they weren't just surviving. They were thriving in areas where other megafauna couldn't establish permanent populations. The frozen steppes of Siberia, the windswept plains of Kazakhstan, the harsh grasslands of Central Asia, these were their hunting grounds. These were territories where the combination of extreme cold, sparse vegetation, and brutal competition eliminated most other large herbivores. The secret, I believe, lay in their approach to resource management. While mammoth herds required vast areas to support their numbers, moving constantly to find sufficient food, Elasmotherium operated on a different principle. They were territorial specialists, claiming specific ranges and defending them with an aggressive efficiency that made migration unnecessary. That horn wasn't just a weapon, it was a property deed written in bone and enforced through violence. Consider the advantages this gave them during the harshest periods of the Ice Age. When food became scarce and competition intensified, mammoth herds had to keep moving, constantly searching for new feeding grounds while burning precious calories. Elasmotherium simply cleared their territory of competitors and settled in for the long haul. They could access buried vegetation that other creatures couldn't reach, defend prime feeding areas that others couldn't claim, and maintain energy reserves that migration-dependent species couldn't match. The fossil record tells a story of creatures that weren't just surviving, they were prospering. Elasmotherium remains have been found across a range that stretched from Ukraine to Mongolia, a distribution that suggests not desperate wandering, but successful territorial expansion. These weren't refugees from climate change. They were the landlords of the Ice Age, collecting rent in the form of exclusive access to the best grazing areas. And unlike mammoth populations, which fluctuated dramatically with environmental changes, Elasmotherium populations remained relatively stable throughout their existence. This wasn't luck. It was the natural result of a survival strategy so effective that it made them nearly immune to the environmental press that devastated other megafauna. For a creature so perfectly adapted to Ice Age conditions, so dominant in its chosen environment, and so well equipped for survival, Elasmotherium's extinction presents one of paleontology's most perplexing mysteries. How do you eliminate something that appeared virtually indestructible? While mammoths managed to survive in various forms until roughly 4,000 years ago, with some populations persisting on isolated islands well into human civilization, Elasmotherium vanished from the fossil record around 39,000 years ago. This wasn't a gradual decline. It was a sudden, complete disappearance that left no descendants and precious few clues about what could have overwhelmed such a formidable creature. The conventional explanation points to climate change, but this theory has some serious problems. Elasmotherium had already survived multiple ice ages, numerous warming periods, and dramatic environmental shifts throughout its history. These were creatures that had proven themselves capable of adapting to changing conditions over millions of years. Why would this particular climate shift prove fatal when so many previous ones had been survived? Some researchers suggest human hunting prey, but again, the evidence doesn't quite add up. While humans were certainly present in Elasmotherium's range during the late Pleistocene, the idea that early human populations could have systematically eliminated creatures this large and dangerous seems optimistic at best. Remember, we're talking about 5-ton animals armed with 6-eft horns and the temperament of a cornered badger. Even with primitive weapons, the cost-benefit analysis of hunting such creatures seems questionable. Perhaps the most disturbing possibility is that Elasmotherium's very dominance contributed to its downfall. Their territorial nature, while advantageous during stable periods, may have prevented them from adapting to rapidly changing conditions. Unlike mammoths, which could migrate to more favorable areas, Elasmotherium populations may have been too committed to their territories to abandon them when conditions deteriorated. But here's the truly unsettling part. The disappearance was so complete that for centuries, scientists weren't even Elasmotherium had existed at all. Unlike mammoth remains, which are found regularly and in excellent condition, Elasmotherium fossils are rare and often fragmentary. It's almost as if something deliberately erased them from the archaeological record. Recent discoveries have added new layers to this mystery. Some fossils show evidence of stress markers and nutritional deficiencies that suggest the final populations were struggling with environmental press. Others display unusual growth patterns that might indicate disease or genetic problems. The picture emerging is of a species that didn't just disappear. It collapsed suddenly and catastrophically. Taken together, the evidence paints a grim picture. Whatever eliminated Elasmotherium was powerful enough to bring down a creature that had reigned unchallenged for ages, resilient, dominant, and built to endure. And yet it vanished with barely a trace. For an animal that once defined the Ice Age landscape, the silence surrounding its extinction is genuinely haunting. The mammoth survival story, impressive as it is, suddenly seems less like triumph and more like luck. They weren't necessarily better adapted. Elasmotherium. It wasn't just another Ice Age animal. To me, it felt like the pinnacle of prehistoric power, a creature so finely tuned to its environment that it redefined what dominance looked like. The mammoth may have gotten the fame, but Elasmotherium earned the title that mattered most, the real titan of the Ice Age. But Elasmotherium wasn't the only behemoth history forgot. While it ruled the frozen steppes, another titan far to the south was the definition of giant altogether, bigger than a mammoth, heavier than a T-Rex, and possibly the largest land mammal to ever walk the earth. When I envision the world that shaped our earliest ancestors, I typically imagine a landscape dominated by predators. Saber-toothed cats stalking the savanna, massive hyenas lurking near waterholes, and early humans huddled around fires for protection. But what if one of the most significant competitors our ancestors faced wasn't a carnivore at all, but another primate? One so massive it would tower over any human alive today. Meet Dinopithecus inans, the terrible ape of Pleistocene Africa. Standing over 1.5 meters or around 5 feet tall when upright and weighing up to 150 kilograms or 330 pounds, it was nearly 5 times heavier than today's largest baboons. These colossal primates shared the African landscape with Australopithecus, an early Homo species, between roughly 3 to 2 million years ago. Yet, despite their imposing presence during this pivotal chapter of prehistory, they remain virtually unknown outside of specialized scientific circles. Dinopithecus belongs to the family Cercopithecidae, the Old World monkeys, rather than the hominid family. Specifically, it's classified within the subfamily Papionini, alongside modern baboons, gelatas, and mangabeys. Despite this taxonomic distance from humans, Dinopithecus represents one of the most remarkable examples of primate gigantism in the fossil record. The genus first entered scientific literature in 1938 when paleontologist Robert Broom described Dinopithecus enans, based on fossil remains from Sterkfontein, near Pretoria, South Africa. The name itself tells a story. Dino, from the Greek, for terrible or fearfully great. Pithecus, meaning ape or monkey, and enans, meaning huge in Latin. A fitting title, I think, for a creature that pushed the boundaries of what we thought primates could become. Subsequent discoveries have primarily come from cave sites in South Africa, including Kromdraai and Cooper's Cave, locations famously associated with early hominin remains. Fossil evidence includes partial skulls, mandibles, and postcranial elements that allow paleontologists to reconstruct its appearance and lifestyle. Most fossils date between 3 and 2 million years ago, placing Dinopithecus firmly in the Pliocene epoch alongside early Australopithecus and Homo species. Physically, Dinopithecus was a scaled-up baboon built for terrestrial power. Its skull alone meet up to 30 centimeters in males and featured an elongated muzzle, enlarged canines, and a prominent sagittal crest for anchoring massive jaw muscles, indicators of both feeding strength and male-male competition. The mandible was exceptionally robust, with a deep body adapted to handle powerful chewing forces far beyond what is seen in modern baboons. Dental analysis shows a heavy emphasis on grinding plant material. Large molars with thick enamel point to a diet that included fibrous vegetation, seeds, and tubers, foods that required prolonged mastication. These adaptations suggest Dinopithecus could exploit tough resources that smaller primates couldn't process efficiently, offering a survival edge in diverse or fluctuating environments. Still, for all that chewing power, it needed a body that could carry the weight, literally. Though fossilized postcranial remains are fragmentary, they leave no doubt. This was a ground dweller built like a fortress. The bones are dense, the muscle attachments oversized, and the proportions suggest a primate that moved low and heavy. It wasn't agile, but it didn't need to be. It was stable, durable, a four-limbed tank that could traverse both woodland and savanna. Now, here's where the social structure gets fascinating. Sexual dimorphism in Dinopithecus was extreme, even more pronounced than in modern baboons. Males may have weighed up to twice as much as females and bore significantly larger canines and cranial crests. This suggests intense male competition, likely involving physical confrontations and dominance displays, a social structure where size directly translated to reproductive success. Yet all this leaves Dinopithecus somewhere in the middle of its ecosystem. Its size positioned it as a mesopredator, both hunter and hunted. It likely fed on fruits, seeds, roots, and small animals while remaining vulnerable to apex predators like saber-toothed cats or large hyenas. Its bulk, strength, and potential for aggressive defense would have made it a formidable opponent, one that early hominins may have respected, avoided, or even competed with. Modern baboons are notoriously territorial, confrontational, and quick to violence when threatened, and Dinopithecus almost certainly took that to the extreme. With large, dominant males leading the charge, a threatened troop could have erupted into an explosion of noise, displays, and physical retaliation. Raised hackles, deafening vocalizations, and jaw-clapping would have been the first warning. But if that didn't work, those massive canines weren't just for show. A provoked Dinopithecus, especially a protective male, could have delivered devastating bites and powerful strikes capable of injuring or killing mid-sized predators. Some paleontologists estimate Dinopithecus could have delivered bite forces comparable to those of big cats, perhaps reaching or even exceeding 2,000 pounds of crushing force. I sometimes wonder what it must have been like to witness the very crucible of humanity, to see firsthand the moment when everything changed. Dinopithecus was there. Between 3 and 2 million years ago, as this massive primate roamed South Africa, early Homo was emerging. Upright walking was becoming established, brains were growing larger, and the first stone tools were appearing. This creature, Dinopithecus, wasn't one to back down. It simply didn't need to. Its bite force was more than enough to crush bone or tear through muscle, and like modern papionins, they likely lived in social groups, meaning confrontation didn't just mean facing one individual, it meant facing many. Imagine a defensive circle of 10 to 20 large-bodied primates, all bristling with muscle and rage. That would have been a serious deterrent to even large carnivores, or for that matter, early hominins. During the Pleistocene era, South Africa was undergoing significant climatic shifts. For a primate of Dinopithecus's exceptional size, these changes brought both unique challenges and new opportunities. Forests were gradually giving way to more open woodlands and grasslands, a transition that favored adaptable ground-dwelling species. Fossil sites suggest it inhabited a mosaic landscape of open savanna interspersed with woodlands and riverine forest, environments not unlike those preferred by modern baboons. Troop life in Dinopithecus likely mirrored that of modern baboons, but on a far more intimidating scale. These multi-male, multi-female groups were probably structured around rigid dominance hierarchies, with adult males asserting their rank through visual displays and, when necessary, brutal physical confrontations. Some males weighed up to 150 kilo. These clashes were anything but subtle. Adult males likely positioned themselves on the outskirts of the troop, forming a living barrier against potential predators. At dawn, the group would descend from cliffs or tall trees, safe havens used to avoid nocturnal hunters. From there, the day began with movement and lots of eating. Feeding likely consumed much of the daylight hours. Adult males may have needed up to 7 kilos of plant matter daily. Grasses, seeds, fruits, bulbs, tubers, all requiring tremendous chewing power. While plants formed the base of their diet, they weren't strictly herbivores. Like their modern relatives, Dinopithecus likely supplemented with animal protein, small vertebrates, insects, scavenged carcasses. But here's the twist. With their size and strength, they may have taken things further. Juvenile antelope or the young of larger prey animals weren't out of the question. And when it came to disputed carcasses, their bulk alone may have been enough to intimidate other predators into backing off. Much like modern papionins, Dinopithecus likely relied on a rich set of vocalizations, facial cues, body postures, and physical contact. With brains scaled to their size and complex social structures to manage, their interactions were probably just as nuanced, broadcasting everything from individual rank to predator warnings with a glance or a grunt. The fossil evidence places Dinopithecus, in close association with hominin, remains at several critical sites. At Swartkrans and Cooper's Cave in South Africa's Cradle of Humankind, Dinopithecus fossils have been found in the same deposits as Australopithecus robustus and early Homo specimens. This wasn't just proximity across a landscape. These primates inhabited the same immediate environments, drank from the same water sources, sheltered in the same cave systems, and likely observed each other regularly. The size disparity alone would have created a power imbalance. Early hominins stood approximately 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall and weighed between 30 to 55 kilos. They would have been significantly outmatched by adult male Dinopithecus, which averaged around 80 kilo, with larger individuals reaching up to 150 kilo. Armed with formidable canines and superior upper body strength, even the smaller female Dinopithecus would have presented a physical threat. Competition for resources was inevitable. Both groups were omnivorous with overlapping dietary preferences, though with different specializations. Early hominins were developing adaptations for a more versatile diet, including meat obtained through scavenging and possibly hunting, while Dinopithecus likely specialized in efficiently processing large quantities of plant materials. Nevertheless, both would have sought out the same high-value food resources: fruits, nuts, tubers, and water sources, creating potential conflict points. And it wasn't just diet that brought them into contact. Both groups favored mosaic environments, offering a mix of woodlands for shelter and open areas for foraging. Both likely needed trees or cliff faces for nighttime safety from predators. Both would have been drawn to reliable water sources, particularly during dry seasons. This shared preference for similar habitats would have ended regular encounters between the species. The responses of early hominins to Dinopithecus were likely complex and situational. Direct competition was probably avoided when possible, with hominins developing greater behavioral flexibility to compensate for their physical disadvantage. This might have included adjusting activity patterns to avoid peak Dinopithecus feeding times, developing more efficient foraging strategies, or utilizing tools to access food resources unavailable to even the powerful Dinopithecus. One intriguing possibility is that the presence of Dinopithecus may have accelerated hominin tool use and cooperation. When confronted with larger, more physically imposing competitors, our ancestors, I've often wondered about the press faced by early hominins, sharing their world with mega monkeys and formidable predators. Imagine needing to develop technological solutions just to crack open a nut, or coordinating group defense in a landscape teeming with dangers. It must have been a constant struggle for survival. The predator dynamics alone create a fascinating, if terrifying, picture. Both Dinopithecus and those early hominins faced threats from big cats, hyenas, and even crocodiles. I find myself wondering if a troop of Dinopithecus might have inadvertently protected smaller hominins simply by being too large and aggressive for predators to risk an attack. Or perhaps a small group of hominins might have attracted predators, inadvertently putting the Dinopithecus at risk. Dinopithecus, sadly, vanished around 1.8 to 1.6 million years ago. Climate change likely played a significant role, with expanding grasslands and shrinking woodlands disrupting their access to food and shelter. Smaller, more adaptable baboons may have also outcompeted them. Then came Homo erectus, bringing more advanced tools, broader diets, and intensified competition for resources. And of course, predation dynamics shifted, with emerging carnivores posing increased risks, especially to the young. Disease, too, could have played a role. It's a somber thought that the very traits that once made Dinopithecus successful, their large size, slow reproduction, and specialized diet, may have ultimately led to their downfall. Their extinction is a stark reminder of how large-bodied species gradually disappeared under mounting press. But there were other terrors in those ancient days. In ancient Greece, they spoke of Anoxian dirus, the terrible wolf, a creature so dominant, so ferocious, that even the largest prehistoric animals feared it. With jaws capable of tearing through the flesh and bones of a mammoth, it struck fear into the hearts of all who crossed its path. This was the dire wolf, apex predators, renowned for their meat-centric diet and intimidating hunting skills. Their dental features, like those distinct posterior cuspids and transverse crests, set them apart from other wolf species. Their digestive systems were tailored for processing meat, short intestines optimized for their carnivorous diet. Their robust skeletons, powerful limbs, and broad chest hinted at their strength. And their bite force, among the strongest of any canid, enabling them to take down formidable prey with remarkable efficiency. Dire wolves prowled across diverse landscapes, from the plains of North America to the arid savannas of South America, and even the steppes of Eastern Asia. In North America, they hunted bison antiquus, Pleistocene horses, and large ground sloths. In South America, their diet included ground sloths, glyptodons, toxodons, mastodons, and extinct camels. And in Eastern Asia, they faced formidable opponents like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, steppe bison, and wild horses. Amidst fierce competition with other predators like Xenochion, Smilodon, the American lion, and the giant short-faced bear, dire wolves fought for dominance in the food chain. At La Brea, they clashed with predators and scavengers amidst trapped herbivores, showcasing their dominance by outnumbering gray wolves 5-1. They lived in monogamous pairs, hunting in packs, displaying fierce determination and adaptability. Their hunting strategies, tooth breakage rates, and pack dynamics offer insights into their evolutionary prowess and survival instincts. With their ability to hunt a wide range of prey, their adaptability, ferocity, and versatility, the dire wolf truly stood as a ruler of the food chain. The origin of the dire wolf has long sparked debate. One theory suggests they arose from an expansion of the genus Canis from Eurasia. Another posits that they emerged from an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from Canis. Recent advancements in genetic analysis have shed new light on this mystery. Back in 1992, scientists attempted to extract mitochondrial DNA from dire wolf remains, but tar residue stubbornly clung to the bone, thwarting their efforts. Finally, in 2021, scientists got their hands on nuclear DNA from 5 dire wolf fossils. These discoveries revealed that dire wolves represent a unique genetic lineage that split from wolf-like canines a staggering 5.7 million years ago. This supports the theory of an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. It's rather remarkable. Despite similarities in skeletal structures, dire wolves and gray wolves are not closely related. This is a case of convergent evolution, where different species develop similar traits independently. Dire wolves stand out as a unique species within the canine world. The story of the dire wolf spans an impressive 40 million years. It began with the arrival of the canid family in North America. From fox-like vulpini to dog-like canini, the diverse branches of their family tree show us some truly intriguing variations. I've always been fascinated by how these creatures adapted to such diverse environments. Dire wolf fossils have been discovered in a variety of habitats across North and South America: plains, grasslands, forested mountain areas, and arid savannas. The most fossil-abundant areas are the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles and the Tule Springs fossil beds in Nevada. While their remains are less common at high latitudes in North America, recent discoveries of Asian dire wolf fossils challenge previous theories about their range. Fossils have been reported in various states in the United States, with major sites located east of the Rocky Mountains. They've also been uncovered in various locations across Mexico, particularly in the San Josecito Cave and El Cedazo. And in South America, specimens have been dated to less than 17,000 years ago in countries including Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Ecuador. I remember being particularly struck by the discovery of a dire wolf fossil in northeastern China in 2020. It suggests a migration route from mid-latitude North America across Beringia into Eurasia, challenging previous assumptions about barriers to their dispersal. Understanding the physical characteristics of dire wolves really sheds light on their remarkable adaptations and behaviors. The dire wolf, similar in proportions to modern North American wolves like the Yukon wolf and northwestern wolf, exhibited variations in size and morphology. Some dire wolf specimens from Rancho La Brea were smaller than the largest northern wolves today, while others were larger. The dire wolf had smaller feet and a larger head compared to modern wolves of similar body size, with a massive skull characterized by broader dimensions and a higher sagittal crest. Geographic differences were observed, with specimens from California and Mexico showing distinct craniodental features and limb proportions compared to those from east of the Continental Divide. Canis dirus gildayi had shorter and lighter limbs, making it less adapted for running than timber wolves and coyotes, while Canis dirus possessed longer limbs comparable to the Yukon wolf. Around 125,000 years ago, dire wolves roamed the earth when the sea level was 8 meters higher than today during the Sangamonian interglacial period. The Wisconsin glacial period followed, lasting from 80,000 to 20,000 years ago, also known as the Ice Age, with glaciers covering much of North America. Dire wolves went extinct 9,500 years ago, marking the end of a unique era. Research indicates that dire wolves evolved separately from modern North American gray wolves and coyotes without genetic mixing. The reasons for their extinction remain debated, likely involving factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability. The disappearance of dire wolves marked the end of a unique lineage within the Canidae family and potentially altered predator-prey dynamics at the time. Between 125,000 and 9,500 years ago, significant climatic shifts occurred, shaping the environment in which dire wolves lived. These changes, alongside fluctuations in prey populations, likely influenced their survival. Dire wolves existed in diverse habitats, ranging from grasslands to forests, adapting to various environmental conditions. As apex predators, they played a crucial role in regulating ecosystems, impacting the populations of herbivores and smaller predators. Their extinction represented a loss of biodiversity and disrupted ecological balances established over millennia. While interbreeding is known among wolf-like canines, studies have found no evidence of genetic mixing between dire wolves and extant North American gray wolves or coyotes, suggesting independent evolution. The exact reasons for their extinction remain a subject of debate, with factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability likely playing a role. Reflecting on the era of the dire wolf, its formidable presence and powerful bite force truly captivate the imagination. But thinking about apex predators always brings me back to the dinosaurs. In the grand tapestry of Earth's history, few chapters are as captivating as the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. These magnificent creatures dominated our planet for over 160 million years, shaping ecosystems and adapting into a myriad of forms that continue to capture our imagination. But as the curtain fell on the age of reptiles, it gave way to an unexpected sequel, one where the supporting characters stepped into the spotlight and nearly stole the show. Enter the forest racids, more commonly known as the terror birds. These feathered nightmares emerged from the ashes of the dinosaur extinction, carrying the torch of their terrifying predecessors and proving that nature abhors a vacuum, especially when it comes to apex predators. Roughly 53 million years ago, in the early Eocene, the world was a very different place, a hothouse Earth with lush forests stretching from pole to pole, filled with a diverse range of life forms that emerged after the extinction of the dinosaurs. It was in this steamy prehistoric paradise that the first terror bird, Paleopsilopterus, made its debut. Standing at a modest height of 1 meter or 3 feet, this Brazilian bird might not have seemed particularly terrifying at first glance. In fact, it was about the same size as a modern-day stork, hardly the stuff of nightmares. But appearances can be deceiving, and Paleopsilopterus had something its contemporaries lacked: potential. What set it apart was its agility and speed, traits that would become hallmarks of its descendants. While it may not have been the apex predator of its time, dwarfed by monstrous crocodilians and giant snakes, it was a harbinger of things to come. Imagine the surprise of early European mammals when a South American terror bird appeared in their midst. Althornis, as it was known, brought a taste of the New World to the Old, the only member of its family to have ever lived outside the Americas. It makes you wonder what they thought when this exotic predator arrived. But even before Althornis, nature, it seemed, had plans for this lineage of avian predators, plans that involved getting bigger, much bigger. Just 3 million years after Paleopsilus took its first steps, Eleuthernis emerged, a terror bird that stood 50% taller than its ancestor, a formidable predator. As the epochs rolled by, the terror birds continued to grow, adapt, and diversify, each new species trying to outdo its predecessors in size and ferocity. The Oligocene epoch, spanning from about 34 to 23 million years ago, marked a turning point in the terror bird saga. It was during this time that the family truly began to live up to its name with the emergence of giants that would have given pause to even the bravest of prey, the Paraphosaurus. This Brazilian bird was an absolute behemoth that stood 1.4 meters or 4.5 feet tall and tipped the scales at a whopping 180 kilograms or 400 pounds, outweighing even the largest living bird today, the ostrich. This was no lightweight contender. Paraphosaurus was built like a feathered tank, with robust bones that spoke of raw power. Paleontologists believe that Paraphosaurus hunted using a combination of kicks, slashes, and powerful jabs with its sharp beak, a hunting style that might remind one of a prehistoric version of mixed martial arts. Paraphosaurus wasn't just a mindless brute. Like many of its terror bird kin, it likely possessed a level of intelligence that set it apart from other contemporary predators. Studies of terror bird brain cases suggest that they had well-developed visual and auditory centers, indicating keen senses that would have made them formidable hunters. As impressive as Paraphosaurus was, it was merely setting the stage for what was to come. As we step into the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, spanning from about 23 to 2.5 million years ago, we encounter the true giants of the terror bird family, creatures that pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be a bird, reaching sizes that rivaled the predatory dinosaurs of old. Three names stand out in this pantheon of avian terrors: Titanus, Kelenken, and Brontornis. Each of these genera represents the pinnacle of the terror bird lineage, and each had its own claim to fame. Titanus, the youngest and smallest of the trio, was also the most adventurous. While most terror birds were content to dominate South America, Titanus had grander ambitions. It crossed the newly formed land bridge connecting North and South America during the Great American Interchange, becoming the only large South American predator to successfully establish itself in North America. Unlike most of its relatives, this bird lived in what is now the United States, including the states of Texas, Florida, and California. Standing 2 meters or 6.6 feet tall, Titanus would have been an imposing sight for the mammals of North America. Imagine the shock of a Pliocene horse or ground sloth accustomed to watching out for saber-toothed cats and dire wolves, suddenly confronted by this alien predator, half bird, half nightmare. But as impressive as Titanus was, it was dwarfed by its cousins back in South America. Kelenken, named after a mythological Tehuelche spirit, stood a towering 3 meters or 9.8 feet tall and weighed around 250 kilograms or 550 pounds. This was a bird the size of a grizzly bear with a head larger than that of a horse and a beak that could crush bone. Speaking of its head, recent studies have shown that Kelenken and other large terror birds possessed a unique skull structure that set them apart from their smaller relatives. Known as the terror bird skull type, this adaptation gave them increased bite force and pecking power. This suggests that these giants may have been capable of taking down larger prey than previously thought, potentially including some of the megafauna that roamed South America during their reign. But the title of the largest terror bird is still hotly debated, with Brontornis giving Kelenken a run for its money. While slightly shorter at 2.8 meters or 9.2 feet, Brontornis was built like a feathered bulldozer, potentially weighing up to 400 kilograms or 880 pounds. This made it not just the heaviest terror bird, but also the heaviest carnivorous bird of all time and the fourth heaviest bird overall. Interestingly, Brontornis has been the subject of scientific controversy. Some paleontologists have questioned whether it was truly a terror bird or even a carnivore at all, citing similarities in its toe claws to those of herbivorous birds. However, recent studies have identified features in Brontornis's vertebrae that are unique to terror birds, lending weight to its classification as a member of this fearsome family. Whether Brontornis was a terror bird or not, its massive size would have made it a force to be reckoned with. Its weight likely made it slower than its more nimble cousins, but what it lacked in speed, it made up for in raw power. One can imagine Brontornis as the tank of the terror bird lineage. I find myself thinking about terror birds often, even now. Creatures seemingly built for absolute dominance, yet ultimately gone. I'm fascinated by how these avian predators, some reaching immense sizes, once steamrolled over any prey in their path. While size certainly played a role for giants like Kalinkin and Brontoris, many terror birds adopted a different strategy: speed. Studies of their leg bones reveal a structure strikingly similar to modern ostriches, with short thigh bones and elongated lower leg and foot bones. This adaptation points to remarkable high-speed running ability. Paleontologists estimate that some terror birds, including larger species like Titanus, could have reached speeds exceeding 30 mph, 48 km/h, faster than Usain Bolt, while being twice as tall and outweighing him several times over. But speed wasn't just for chasing prey. For smaller and medium-sized terror birds, it was crucial for defense. In a world teeming with large predators, giant carnivorous mammals, and enormous crocodilians, a quick escape could mean survival. This combination of speed and size made terror birds versatile predators, adaptable to various hunting strategies. Smaller, faster species might have specialized in chasing swift prey like small mammals and reptiles, while larger, more powerful species could have employed ambush tactics or even tackled larger, more dangerous quarry. While their imposing size and fearsome beaks often steal the spotlight, the true power of terror birds lay in their highly developed senses. Recent studies of their skulls and brain cases reveal sensory capabilities far exceeding many of their contemporaries. While their eyesight might not have been as sharp as modern raptors, it was far from poor. Their eyes were well developed and positioned to provide excellent depth perception, a crucial advantage for any predator. What truly set their vision apart was its versatility. They were equally adept at seeing in bright daylight and in the dim light of dawn and dusk, making them effective hunters around the clock. The inner ear structure of terror birds suggests an acute sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. This ability would have allowed them to detect the footsteps and movements of potential prey, even when hidden by dense vegetation. I imagine a terror bird standing motionless in the prehistoric forests of South America, its head cocked slightly to one side. It might appear to be resting, but in reality, every fiber of its being is alert, its incredibly sensitive ears picking up the faintest rustle of leaves or the softest patter of tiny feet. In an instant, it can pinpoint the location of its unsuspecting prey and launch into action. This combination of visual and auditory prowess made terror birds the complete predatory package. It's no wonder these birds dominated their ecosystems for millions of years. But even the mightiest rulers faced their downfall, and the reign of the terror birds was no exception. For millions of years, these avian predators had ruled supreme in South America, developing into a diverse array of species that filled various ecological niches. But somewhere along the line, their luck ran out. Traditionally, the extinction of the terror birds was linked to the Great American Interchange, a major paleozoographic event that occurred about 2.7 million years ago. This event saw the formation of the Isthmus of Panama, creating a land bridge between North and South America. Animals from both continents were able to migrate across this newly formed connection, leading to a significant reshuffling of fauna. The conventional wisdom held that the influx of new predators from North America, including cats, dogs, and bears, outcompeted the terror birds, leading to their eventual extinction. It was a neat and tidy explanation that seemed to make perfect sense. However, as is often the case in science, the truth has turned out to be more complex and nuanced. Recent studies have cast doubt on this simple competition-based extinction model, revealing a more intricate tapestry of factors that led to the terror bird's downfall. One of the primary challenges to the competition hypothesis comes from a closer examination of the fossil record. It turns out that most terror birds, along with many of their main South American competitors, had already disappeared long before placental predators arrived in South America in significant numbers. This timing mismatch suggests that something else was at play. Moreover, the success of Titanas in North America serves as a counterpoint to the idea that terror birds couldn't compete with placental mammals. Not only did Titanas successfully expand its range northward during the interchange, but it also managed to coexist with large canids and felines for millions of years. Clearly, at least some terror birds were more than capable of holding their own against mammalian predators. So, if competition alone didn't doom the terror birds, what did? The answer, as is often the case in paleontology, likely involves a complex interplay of factors. Climate change, in particular, may have played a significant role. From the Oligocene to the Pliocene, Earth's climate was on a long-term cooling trend, culminating in a series of ice ages. This global cooling would have had a profound impact on the ecosystems that terror birds called home. As temperatures dropped and habitats changed, the lush forests that many terror bird species relied on would have given way to more open grasslands. The idea that terror birds survived almost to the cusp of human arrival in South America, it haunts me. Imagine our ancestors encountering those feathered giants. What stories would have been told? Could there be any truth to the legends of giant birds that persist even now in South American folklore? It's unlikely humans ever directly interacted with them, but the possibility that stories of these creatures were passed down, that's not entirely far-fetched. Other megafauna that coexisted with early humans, like woolly mammoths and giant ground sloths, certainly left lasting impressions on our culture and mythology. The terror birds, though, faced immense challenges. As South America drifted closer to North America, the landscape changed, becoming more open. Some terror birds may have adapted, but the larger, more specialized species likely struggled to find enough prey. The influx of new competitors from the north would have added even more preys. Despite all of this, they were remarkably resilient. We used to think they went extinct around 1 million years ago, but new fossil evidence has dramatically altered that timeline. Some smaller species have now been dated to as recently as 96,000 years ago. Even more tantalizing is the discovery of fossils attributed to an unidentified terror bird species in a formation dated to just 18,000 years ago. If confirmed, that would mean they survived almost to the cusp of human arrival. This near miss between humans and terror birds serves as a poignant reminder of the incredible diversity of life that has existed on our planet. If they had managed to hang on for just a few thousand years longer, our understanding of the natural world might be very different today. Speaking of terrifying creatures, let's turn our attention to another apex predator, the Tyrannosaurus rex. For years, it has been regarded as the pinnacle of prehistoric might. The first fragment of a T-Rex skeleton was discovered in Montana in 1902 by paleontologist Barnum Brown. This discovery sparked a new era in dinosaur research. Major finds, like the virtually complete specimen Sue, have offered invaluable information. Through thorough excavation, evaluation, and reconstruction, researchers have pieced together the history of this giant predator. T-Rex, along with other large theropod dinosaurs like Tarbosaurus and Daspeltosaurus, are classified as members of the subfamily Tyrannosaurini within the family Tyrannosauridae. T-Rex represents the top predators of the late Cretaceous era and is a key figure in the evolution of dinosaurs. These creatures were immense, stretching up to 12 meters long, the size of a school bus. Some paleontologists even speculate that certain specimens exceeded 13 meters, dwarfing any contemporary terrestrial predator. They stood as tall as 6 meters at the hips. Estimates suggest a T-Rex could weigh anywhere from 12 to 18 tons. That's the weight of several small cars compressed into one awe-inspiring predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex boasted a sturdy skeletal structure with a distinct vertebral column. Its neck formed a muscular S-shaped curve supporting its massive head. The forelimbs were short with 2 clawed fingers contrasting the long hind limbs. Throughout its skeleton, many bones were hollowed, reducing weight without sacrificing strength. And the skull, reaching up to 1.54 meters in length, about the size of an adult human. I've always been fascinated by the Tyrannosaurus rex, and one of the things that strikes me most is the sheer engineering of its skull. Not just size, but design. Enormous, yes, but also featuring large fenestrae, those natural windows that reduced weight. And then there were the unique adaptations, like an extremely wide rear paired with a narrow snout. That narrow snout gave it exceptional binocular vision. The bones, though massive, were fused and pneumatized, meaning they contained air spaces, further lightening the load. This skull design, I think, is central to understanding the tyrannosaurid trend toward a truly powerful bite. The upper jaw, with its U-shaped tip, could extract more tissue and bone with each bite, though, admittedly, this put a lot of stress on those front teeth. And what teeth they were! In the upper jaw, they had prominent ridges and tips that curled backward, almost like cutting tools. This heterodonty, the variation in tooth shape, is remarkable. The remaining teeth, robust and spaced, resembled, well, lethal bananas. It's a striking image, isn't it? In mature individuals, the upper jaw housed larger teeth than the lower, with the biggest tooth ever discovered measuring a staggering 30.5 centimeters. Both jaws were riddled with small openings. I wonder, did these serve a sensory function or perhaps indicate the presence of external structures? Despite its reputation for massive jaws and teeth, I find myself often pondering the T-Rex's disproportionately small arms. Were they just useless vestiges? Some paleontologists, like Stephen Stanley, propose a rather startling idea, that these small limbs were actually deadly weapons used in hand-to-hand combat. Imagine, these arms, only about 3 feet long, but tipped with crescent-shaped claws, sharpened to a razor edge, capable of inflicting deadly injuries on unsuspecting prey. I picture the T-Rex advancing, its huge head looming, while those strong front limbs made rapid slashing movements. Cutting through tissue and muscle with frightening accuracy, it changes how I see the hunt, painting a picture of quick, effective immobilization, no longer useless like wisdom teeth or flightless bird wings. The T-Rex's arms become crucial weapons, adding another layer to the fear this predator inspired. The Jurassic Park movies, I recall, often portrayed the Tyrannosaurus Rex as having poor eyesight. Characters would evade its notice simply by standing still, but recent scientific findings suggest a very different reality. Paleontologists, using comparative anatomy and fossil evidence, theorize that the T-Rex likely had vision akin to modern predators like hawks. It could detect both moving and stationary objects. This challenges that cinematic depiction and deepens our understanding of its sensory capabilities. Some believe it was an adept ambush predator, using its size, powerful jaws, and heightened senses to swiftly hunt prey. Others see it as a scavenger, feeding on carrion or stealing from carcasses. These differing views highlight the complexity of the T-Rex's behavior and ecological role. It's a debate that continues to fuel research. Beyond its extraordinary eyesight, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, I've learned, also possessed a remarkable sense of smell, much like vultures today. This keen olfactory ability allowed it to spot potential meals from up to 6 kilometers away under ideal conditions. And it wasn't just about sensing prey from afar. The T-Rex was fast. It could pursue its targets at speeds reaching 25 miles per hour, comparable to Usain Bolt's world record sprinting speed. Imagine, if you will, wandering through a primeval forest, trying to find your way back to safety, the sounds of the woods echoing all around you. Suddenly, a tremendous noise stops you cold. A Tyrannosaurus Rex is approaching, your heart races. You sprint, feet pounding on the forest floor, trying desperately to escape. But the earth trembles beneath you as the T-Rex closes in. Glancing back, you see its massive silhouette, gleaming sharp teeth catching the sunlight. There's no escape. The T-Rex's jaws close with incredible force. 50 to 60 teeth, each as big as a banana, pierce your skin simultaneously, sending waves of agony through your body. In that horrifying moment, you experience the true terror of being hunted by the most formidable predator to ever roam the earth. The feeding habits and diet of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, as I understand it, were integral to its dominance as a top predator during the late Cretaceous period. With its massive size and those powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, the T-Rex was a formidable carnivore. Its diet primarily consisted of large herbivorous dinosaurs such as Triceratops and Ankylosaurus, some of the toughest dinosaurs of their time. Occasionally, it would even prey on other large carnivorous dinosaurs, showcasing its fearsome predatory prowess. It's believed that the T-Rex may have sometimes targeted individuals of its own kind or even other formidable predators. It just demonstrates the sheer dominance and terror of this apex predator. But it's not just about the hunt itself. The Tyrannosaurus rex, as I see it, had a significant impact on its entire environment. Its presence necessitated changes in the behavior of other animals. Some dinosaurs developed defenses such as speed or armor to evade its attacks. Others sought refuge in dense forests or migrated to new areas. As the dominant predator, the T-Rex reshaped prey distribution and population dynamics, influencing the ecological balance and the very nature of predator-prey relationships. The Tyrannosaurus rex, of course, shared its environment with a diverse array of other dinosaurs, each possessing unique adaptations and behaviors. Among these were Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Torosaurus, Albertosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Denversaurus, Ornithomimus, and Anzu. The T-Rex's formidable presence. Imagine facing creatures so immense, so powerful, they seem torn from the pages of legend. I'm not talking about dragons or mythical beasts, but very real animals, giants of a dying world. They could crush ships, skewer warriors, and turn the tides of battles. The Vikings, armed with iron and wood, didn't just conquer lands. They fought against nature itself. These clashes were so intense that their echoes still whisper through the centuries. The first of these beasts that our Norse ancestors regularly met was the magnificent aurochs, wild cattle unlike any alive today. Standing a towering 6 feet at the shoulder, these were no ordinary farm animals. A full-grown aurochs bull could weigh over 2,200 pounds, its muscular frame dwarfing even the largest modern cattle breeds. But what truly made the aurochs intimidating were its enormous horns. These curved weapons could span over 3 feet from tip to tip. They weren't just for defense, they were perfectly designed killing instruments. The forward-facing orientation allowed bulls to charge threats directly with enough force to impale a fully armored warrior or even flip a small boat. Archaeological finds suggest that aurochs' horns were often kept as trophies after successful hunts. They became drinking vessels for the most prestigious Viking warriors. The relationship between Vikings and aurochs was more than just about survival. It was woven into their very culture, leaving its mark on Norse art, symbolism, and even the warrior mindset. Hunting these beasts was a true test of courage for young Norse warriors. Unlike modern hunting, where distance and firearms provide safety, Viking hunters had to approach within spear-throwing range, close enough to smell the animal's breath. A charging aurochs could reach speeds of 22 miles per hour, leaving hunters with mere seconds to make their throw or face the consequences. Many Norse graves contained evidence of horn wounds, silent testimony to hunts gone wrong. By the Viking Age, aurochs populations were already declining across Europe due to habitat loss and hunting prez. The last known aurochs died in 1627 in Poland's Jaktorów forest, long after the Viking era had ended. But the land wasn't the only domain where Vikings encountered magnificent creatures that have since vanished. The seas that formed their highways held their own vanished giants. If you sailed with Vikings across the North Atlantic, you would have witnessed an extraordinary sight along rocky coastlines. Colonies of thousands of black and white birds standing upright like tiny sentinels. The great auk, often called the original penguin, bore a striking resemblance to its southern hemisphere counterparts, despite having no direct relation. Standing about 2.5 to 2.8 feet tall, these flightless birds were perfectly adapted to the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Their wings had transformed into powerful flippers that propelled them through the ocean with remarkable speed. Measurements based on similar birds suggest they could fly underwater at up to 22 miles per hour. On land, however, they were awkwardly vulnerable, waddling upright on two legs, unable to take flight when danger approached. For Vikings, the great auk represented an almost absurdly convenient resource. Unlike most prey that required chasing, these birds couldn't flee effectively on land. Norse seafarers could simply walk among nesting colonies and select their victims. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands reveals vast quantities of great auk bones in kitchen middens, often showing cut marks consistent with meat removal. The great auk's waterproof feathers were prized for insulation and bedding. Its fat provided lamp oil, and its beaks became decorative items. A Viking burial in Norway even featured a necklace with 5 great auk beaks, hinting at both symbolic and practical value. Ironically, the bird's marine adaptations made it vulnerable, breeding only on a few remote islands, laying a single egg on rocky ground. By the Viking Age, human hunting had already forced some colonies to vanish. The great auk's final extinction didn't occur until 1844, when the last confirmed pair was killed on the island of Elde off Iceland. A sad epilogue to a relationship that began when the first Norse ships reached their breeding grounds. The birds that had once numbered in the millions, forming colonies so vast they darkened shorelines, vanished because they had no natural defense against human predation. While Vikings ventured across vast oceans, the forests that surrounded their settlements held creatures just as remarkable and far more dangerous. Among these was a distinct forest giant that many researchers now believe represented a specialized hybrid population, the European forest elk, or skogselg, a creature that combined characteristics of what we now classify as separate moose and elk species. Standing up to 7 feet at the shoulder with magnificent palmate antlers spanning up to 6 feet across, these forest giants were truly imposing. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals distinctive antler configurations, unlike modern European moose populations, suggesting these animals represented a unique genetic lineage that has since disappeared through hunting preyers and hybridization with other cervid populations. What made these forest elk particularly remarkable was their coloration and behavior. Unlike modern moose, with their uniformly dark coats, the Vikings faced dangers far beyond the open sea. It wasn't just the ocean's fury or rival raiders they had to contend with. Even the animals of the land and sea posed a threat. These weren't the familiar farm animals they knew. These were creatures that could feed a village or shatter a longship. Deep within Scandinavia's icy rivers, there was another unexpected powerhouse, one that proved just as valuable as it was dangerous: the forest elk. Cave paintings and dayons suggest these animals had distinctive light patches on their sides and shoulders, creating a mottled appearance that provided excellent camouflage in dappled forest light. Their behavior was reportedly more aggressive than modern moose, particularly during rooting season when bulls would actively defend territories rather than simply competing for females. For Viking communities, these massive deer were a vital source of sustenance. A single animal could provide over 500 kilo of meat, enough to feed a small village for weeks during harsh northern winters. Their hides, tougher and more durable than domestic cattle leather, were prized for shields, boats, and winter clothing. Perhaps most valued were their enormous antlers, which Viking craftsmen transformed into everything from tools and weapons to drinking horns for isles and kings. By the late Viking Age, these distinctive forest elk populations were already showing signs of decline. The combination of intensive hunting and forest clearing for agriculture fragmented their habitat across Scandinavia. As Viking settlements expanded, encounters with these magnificent beasts became increasingly rare, with medieval sources describing them as creatures of the remote wilderness rather than animals regularly seen near human habitation. But as impressive as these forest giants were, they weren't the only creatures shaping Viking survival. While spotting a whale today feels like a rare and wondrous sight, for Viking sailors, such encounters often turned into high-stakes battles. Gray whales were a valuable prize, offering meat, oil, and bone, but hunting them meant rowing dangerously close, where a single thrash of the whale's tail could shatter a longship and send its crew to a cold, watery grave. Unlike most whale species that still inhabit northern seas today, the Atlantic gray whale population was driven to complete extinction by the 18th century. During the Viking Age, however, these magnificent marine mammals were abundant, particularly in coastal waters, where their distinctive feeding behavior made them both visible and vulnerable. Atlantic gray whales reached lengths of 14 to 15 meters, or 46 to 49 feet, comparable to modern gray whales in the Pacific, and weighed up to 36 tons. This made them roughly the size of a Viking longship, a comparison that wouldn't have been lost on Norse seafarers. Their mottled gray coloration, often covered with barnacles and whale lice, gave them a distinctive appearance that featured in Norse dayons of sea creatures. What made gray whales unique among the cetaceans Vikings encountered was their feeding strategy. Unlike deep-diving species, gray whales were bottom feeders that plowed the sea floor for small invertebrates, creating massive mud plumes visible from the surface. This habit brought them into shallow coastal waters, precisely where Viking ships operated most frequently. For Norse communities, gray whales represented an extraordinary bounty when successfully hunted. A single whale could yield up to 20 tons of meat and blubber, enough to feed an entire Viking settlement through the harsh northern winter. Archaeological evidence from coastal North settlement shows specialized bone tools designed specifically for processing whale meat, alongside huge cooking pits that could only have been used for creatures of this size. The hunting of gray whales wasn't without peril. Unlike passive species, such as the right whale, gray whales were known for their aggressive defense when threatened. They would often charge attacking boats using their massive flukes to smash wooden vessels to splinters. Norse sagas contain accounts of whaling expeditions ending in disaster when cornered whales fought back, earning them the nickname devil fish among later whalers. What made Atlantic gray whales particularly vulnerable to hunting was their predictable migration patterns and coastal breeding grounds. Each year, they would travel along well-established routes between feeding areas in the north and calving grounds further south. Vikings, with their intimate knowledge of coastal geography, could anticipate these movements and set up ambush points where the whales would be channeled through narrow passages. By the late Viking Age, gray whale populations were already showing signs of depletion in areas of heaviest Norse settlement. The combination of increased whaling efficiency and the species' low reproductive rate, females typically give birth to just one calf every 2 years, set the stage for their eventual disappearance from Atlantic waters. But while Vikings battled colossal whales at sea, their struggles didn't end once they reached dry land. For the forests of Britain were home to predators just as fierce and far less predictable. In the late 8th century, when Viking longships first landed on the shores of Britain and Ireland, they entered territories where another formidable predator had long reigned supreme, the British wolf. These wolves, genetically distinct from their Scandinavian cousins, had dominated the British Isles for thousands of years, before Norse settlers arrived to carve out new kingdoms. Standing taller than the Honshu wolf of Japan but smaller than modern timber wolves, British wolves typically reached heights of 70 to 85 centimeters or 28 to 33 in at the shoulder and weighed between 30 to 45 kiloda or 66 to 99 lbs. Their thick, often gray-brown coats were adapted to the damp conditions of the British Isles, with distinctive white markings frequently appearing on their chests, a feature noted in several Viking-era daons. When Vikings first raided Lindisfarne in 793 CE, wolves remained common throughout Britain and Ireland, with packs controlling territories from the Scottish Highlands. I've always been fascinated by how the Vikings interacted with the natural world. It wasn't just about raiding and sailing, it was a complex dance of survival and adaptation. Consider the British wolf. Archaeological digs on the Hebrides and Northern Isles have turned up wolf bones bearing cut marks, clear evidence that the Viking newcomers wasted no time in hunting these predators. For Vikings establishing themselves in the British Isles, wolves presented a dual challenge, a threat to their livestock, especially sheep so vital to the Norse economy, in places like the Orkneys and Hebrides, but also a source of respect. Viking warriors admired the wolf's hunting skills and pack coordination, qualities they valued themselves in battle. This complex relationship is etched into the landscape itself. Norse place names like Olvadale, Wolf Valley in Cumbria, and Wolf Hill in Perthshire mark areas where Vikings frequently encountered these animals. Several Viking-era runestones discovered in northern England depict wolf hunts, suggesting these pursuits held ceremonial importance for warriors proving their mettle in new lands. And the wolves crept into their stories too. As Norse settlers mingled with local populations, they absorbed and reshaped Celtic wolf myths into their own traditions. The connection between wolf and warrior grew stronger, with berserkers sometimes described wearing wolf pelts instead of bare skin. Ultimately, the fate of British wolves wasn't sealed by the Vikings themselves, but by their descendants. As Norse settlements evolved into medieval kingdoms, a systematic wolf extermination policy took hold. The process, though beginning in the Viking Age, accelerated, leading to the extinction of wolves in England by the 15th century and in Scotland by the 17th. Ireland's last wolf was reportedly killed in 1786. But there were other creatures, too, creatures that seemed to belong to a more ancient world. The Atlantic and Baltic sturgeons, armored leviathans lurking beneath the rivers and coastal waters of northern Europe. These living fossils, largely unchanged for over 200 million years, once thrived in Viking territories. The Baltic sturgeon in particular grew to immense sizes, with females reaching lengths of up to 10 feet and weights exceeding 660 pounds. Their prehistoric appearance, with bony plates called scutes arranged in rows along their bodies instead of scales, made them unmistakable. Most distinctive was their elongated armor-plated snout with a vacuum-like mouth underneath, perfectly adapted for sucking up mollusks and crustaceans from the river and sea floors. Their immense size made a single catch worthy of inclusion in regional sagas, with several Norse tales mentioning heroes wrestling armored river dragons. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals specialized sturgeon spears with detachable heads designed to pierce the fish's armored exterior, a testament to their importance to Viking fishermen. Beyond their meat, sturgeons offered multiple valuable resources. Their swim bladders were processed into isinglass, used for clarifying beer and wine, and as a powerful adhesive. Their cartilaginous skeletons, when boiled, produced a gelatin used in Viking medicine for joint ailments. Most prized, of course, was sturgeon roe, caviar, a delicacy reserved for jarls and kings. Sadly, by the late Viking Age, sturgeon populations were already declining in heavily settled areas. Their slow reproduction, with females maturing at 15 to 20 years, made them vulnerable to overfishing. Predictable spawning runs and their habit of basking near the surface made them easy targets. In the medieval period, dams blocked spawning routes, and pollution worsened their plight. By the 18th century, Baltic sturgeon had become so rare that Scandinavian monarchs claimed them as royal property, a protection that came too late. As Vikings turned their sights inland, the armored giants of the rivers gave way to the shaggy titans of the forest, the European bison and its forest-dwelling cousin, the wisent. Unlike the American bison, these European relatives were specifically adapted to the dense mixed forests that once covered much of northern and eastern Europe. Standing up to 6.2 feet at the shoulder and weighing over 2,000 pounds, the European bison was the heaviest land animal in Europe during the Viking Age. Bulls developed massive shoulder humps, covered with shaggy dark brown fur that contrasted with the lighter coat on their lower bodies. Their distinctive curved horns, though shorter than those of the aurochs, were equally dangerous when the animal charged. Unlike grassland bison, these woodland giants could navigate between trees with surprising agility, using their powerful bodies to create paths through the densest undergrowth. These natural trails maintained over generations of use, became known to Vikings as bison roads, reliable routes through otherwise impenetrable forest that human travelers would follow. For Viking communities pushing into new territories, these massive herbivores represented both opportunity and challenge. A successful bison hunt could provide meat for an entire village for weeks, along with hides thick enough to stop arrows, making them prized material for shields and winter clothing. The distinctive hump contained concentrated fat reserves that produced high-quality oil for lamps and waterproofing. However, hunting these forest behemoths was extraordinarily dangerous. Unlike deer or smaller game, wounded bison would typically— imagine a creature so powerful, so formidable, that a single charge could obliterate an entire hunting party. The European bison, capable of reaching speeds of 40 kilometers an hour, even through dense woodland, was such a beast. It's sobering to think that these magnificent animals, once a defining presence in the Viking world, were already in decline by the late Viking Age. Their fate, a consequence of intensive hunting and the relentless clearing of forests for agriculture, pushed them into ever more isolated pockets. Unlike the aurochs, however, the European bison clung to existence. A small population remarkably survived in the Białowieża forest, nestled between Poland and Belarus. Today, around 7,000 descendants live there, a living link to those forest giants that Vikings once hunted. It's a poignant reminder that the world the Vikings knew was vanishing even as they sailed and settled. The creatures that shaped their landscapes were fading, victims of the same human expansion and climate shifts that powered the Viking Age itself.